The rain had been falling for 6 hours straight when Lena Voss found the man bleeding out in the parking garage beneath St. Clair Medical Center. She almost walked past him. That was the thing she'd think about later, lying awake at 3 a.m., with the city noise bleeding through her apartment walls. How close she came to not seeing him at all. She'd had a 12-hour shift in the trauma unit. Her feet were screaming inside her compression socks, and she had exactly one thing on her mind: the leftover pad thai in her refrigerator and 8 hours of sleep before she had to do it all over again. But she heard him breathe. Not a groan, not a cry for help, just a single ragged exhale, the kind that sounds like a door about to close for good. Lena stopped, turned, and there he was, wedged between a concrete pillar and a black SUV the size of a small building. One hand pressed against his side, blood running dark and fast between his fingers. Her nursing instincts fired before her fear did. She was on her knees beside him. In seconds, her bag already open, her hands already moving. Hey, look at me!" She grabbed his jaw and turned his face toward her. His eyes were open, dark grey and glassy, tracking her with the slow effort of someone fighting very hard to stay present. He was maybe late 30s, well-built under the expensive coat now soaked through with rain and blood, with a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in 2 days, and a cut above his left brow that had already started to swell. "Don't," he said. His voice came out low, surprisingly controlled for a man losing that much blood. "Don't call anyone." "You're hemorrhaging," she said flatly. "I know." His eyes found hers. "Don't call anyone." Lena sat back on her heels and looked at him, really looked. The coat was cashmere, the watch on his wrist, even smeared with blood, was the kind that cost more than her annual salary. And there were 2 other things she noticed that sent a cold thread of something through her chest. A tattoo on the inside of his wrist, partially visible beneath his cuff. A compass rose with a dagger through its center. And the fact that there was no wallet in sight, no phone, no keys. Just a man who clearly had money and power and who was bleeding to death in a parking garage, asking her not to call for help. She should have called 911 anyway. She almost did. Her hand actually moved toward her pocket, but he caught her wrist, not roughly, just firmly, and his eyes, which had been going in and out of focus, sharpened completely for one single moment. "Please," he said quietly. "Not yet. That word. That one word." Lena didn't know why it stopped her. She'd heard pleas from a lot of people in a lot of desperate situations, but something about the way he said it, not begging, just asking, like a man who almost never had to ask for anything, made her hesitate long enough for her brain to kick in and start actually assessing the wound. Through the coat. Deep, left side, probably clipped something on the way in, but the blood pressure said he still had pressure to lose, which meant nothing catastrophic had been nicked. Yet. If she could get pressure on it, stabilize him, get him somewhere warm and dry in the next 20 minutes. She was insane. She knew she was insane. "My car's on level 2, she heard herself say. "Can you walk?" He could walk. Barely. He leaned on her and she took his weight and they made it to the elevator, then across the 2nd level to her beat-up Subaru, which looked almost comically small beside every other vehicle in this garage. She got him into the passenger seat. He didn't pass out. She counted that as a miracle. The drive to her apartment in Riverside took 14 minutes. She spent 12 of them telling herself she could still turn around, still call an ambulance, still extract herself from whatever this was. She spent 2 of them accepting that she wasn't going to. Her name was Lena Voss. She was 29 years old. She'd been a trauma nurse for 4 years. And she was apparently the kind of person who brought wounded strangers home instead of letting the sensible part of her brain make decisions. Her mother had always said she had too much heart and not enough self-preservation. Lena had always thought that was a compliment. Right now, pulling into the parking lot of her building with a bleeding man in her passenger seat, she wasn't so sure. Getting him upstairs took 15 minutes. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor, no elevator. And by the time she got him through her front door, she was sweating through her scrubs. And he was leaning almost entirely on the doorframe, breathing in short, controlled bursts that told her he was managing pain through sheer discipline. She sat him on her bathroom floor. Put a towel down first, her good towel, the one she'd bought at Target 3 months ago and had been weirdly protective of, which felt like a very stupid thing to think about in this moment. She got his coat off, then his shirt, which he helped with, lifting his arm with a grunt of effort that he controlled too quickly to be called a sound. She'd seen a lot of bodies in trauma. She did not notice his, except in the way she always noticed. Efficiently, clinically, cataloguing what was intact and what wasn't. The wound was on his left side, below the ribs. Entry only, no exit. Bullet still in there. "This needs a hospital," she said. "You are the hospital," he said. His voice was steadier now that he was sitting, his back against the cabinet, one arm resting on his bent knee like they were just having a conversation. "I'm a nurse, not a surgeon. I can't remove a bullet. It doesn't need to come out tonight. Just stop the bleeding, pack it. I have a surgeon." He met her eyes. "I just need to get to him." Lena looked at him for a long moment. "You have a surgeon," she repeated. "Yes. On call. Yes. Who doesn't work at a hospital?" He didn't answer, which was an answer. She washed her hands, got her emergency kit from under the sink, the one her co-workers used to tease her about, the trauma nurse who kept a fully stocked medical bag at home like she was expecting a disaster. She'd never expected a disaster quite like this one. She worked in silence mostly. He was a good patient, which surprised her, still compliant, answering her clinical questions without making her ask twice. Allergies, none he knew of. Blood type, oh, negative. She'd half expected him to be difficult, demanding the kind of man who controlled every room he walked into. Instead, he just watched her work with those grey eyes, steady and quiet, like he was reserving judgment. "What's your name?" she asked, not looking up from the wound. A pause. "Dorian. Just Dorian. For now." She taped the last piece of gauze down and sat back. "Okay, Dorian. You have a through and through that stopped through, which means that bullet is sitting against something it shouldn't be sitting against, and whoever packed this earlier did a terrible job." She looked up at him. "I'm going to do a better one. It's going to hurt. I know. More than you're expecting. I've been shot before." Something about the matter-of-fact way he said that. Not bragging, not performing toughness, just stating a fact, the way someone might mention they'd had a root canal, made the cold thread in her chest pull tighter. She worked quickly and as carefully as she could. He made exactly one sound, a short, controlled exhale through his nose, and then was silent for the rest of it. When she was done, she wrapped him in compression bandages, gave him 2 of the prescription-strength painkillers she had left over from her knee surgery last year, and helped him to the couch because the bathroom floor was not a place anyone was going to recover from anything. He was asleep in 12 minutes. Lena sat on the armchair across from him, for a long time, her kit open on the coffee table, a mug of black coffee in her hand she'd made and forgotten to drink. She watched his chest rise and fall. Outside, the rain kept hitting the windows, and a gust of wind rattled the frame so hard she jumped, her eyes snapping to the door. She should search his coat. She didn't. She wasn't sure why. Some mixture of the way he'd said please and the way he'd held still while she worked and the fact that, even unconscious on her couch, he didn't look like a threat. He looked like a man who was very tired. Her phone sat on the table beside her coffee. She picked it up, put it down, picked it up again. She opened a search browser and typed, "Compass Rose Dagger Tattoo Organized Crime." The results came back in seconds. Lena put the phone face down on the table and did not pick it up again. The Kellner Collective was not a name most people in Chicago knew. It operated in the spaces between the things people preferred not to look at. The port contracts, the logistics routes, the union negotiations that somehow always resolved in the same direction. It had been founded, according to the single academic article she'd managed to skim before she put the phone down, by a man named Heinrich Kellner in 1987. It had passed, upon his death in 2019, to his son. She looked at the man sleeping on her couch. She didn't know if it was him. She had no proof of anything. She had a tattoo and a wound and a very expensive watch, and a man who had a private surgeon and had asked her not to call the police. That was enough. She turned off the living room light and sat in the dark with her coffee and the sound of the rain and the slow, steady breathing of a stranger who might be the most dangerous person she'd ever let into her home. She did not sleep. Every creak of the building made her breath catch. Once, around 2 a.m., a car alarm went off on the street outside and she was on her feet before she'd registered standing up, heart hammering, eyes on the door. The man on the couch didn't stir. By 4 a.m., she'd talked herself in and out of calling the police 11 times. By 5 a.m., she'd accepted that she wasn't going to, and spent the next hour trying to figure out why. She was not a reckless person. She was methodical, practical, the one her friends called when things went wrong because she stayed calm. She did not bring bleeding strangers home. She did not sit in the dark making decisions she couldn't explain. And yet, there was something she kept coming back to, something she couldn't quite logic her way around. He'd had the chance to be dangerous to her 3 times already, in the parking garage, in the car, right now, and he hadn't been. Whatever he was, whatever world he came from, he'd said please and he'd held still, and he'd let her help him. People who wanted to hurt you didn't usually work that hard to be cooperative. She fell asleep in the armchair just before 6 a.m., her feet tucked under her, her coffee cold on the table. She woke to the sound of her name, Voss. Her eyes opened. Grey morning light came through the blinds in thin stripes. The man, Dorian, was sitting up on the couch, his color better, his eyes clear, both hands resting visibly on his knees in a way that she would later realize was deliberate, a gesture designed to communicate non-threat. "How did you know my name?" she asked. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Your hospital badge," he said. "It was on your bag." She looked at the tote on the table. Her St. Clarity clipped to the front pocket, name visible. "Of course. How are you feeling?" she asked, because she was a nurse and it was reflexive. "Better." He paused. "You should look out your front window." Something in his tone made her stomach drop. She stood slowly and went to the window that faced the street, moved the blinds with one finger and looked out. The street below her building was lined with black SUVs, not 1 or 2. She counted 10 before she stopped because the line kept going, disappearing around the corner in both directions, the vehicles idling close together in the grey morning drizzle. Men stood beside them and between them, dark coats, hands clasped in front of them, all facing the building, all still. Her hand on the blinds had gone completely cold. "They followed me," Dorian said from behind her. "I'm sorry, I didn't think they could. I took precautions." He paused. "I was wrong." Lena let the blind fall closed, turned around. He was watching her with that same steady attention she'd noticed the night before, the quality of a man who assessed situations and people with the same efficient precision she used to assess wounds. "Those are your people," she said. "Some of them. Some of them. The ones on the north side of the building are mine." A pause. "The south side is a different matter." Lena leaned against the wall. Her heart was doing something complicated, a kind of fast, uneven rhythm she associated with the worst moments in the trauma bay, the moments when you realized the situation was bigger than you'd initially understood. "Is someone going to shoot at my building?" "No." The word was immediate, certain. "Not while I'm in it." That's a very specific reassurance. "It's the one I can give you." She looked at him, really looked. The compression bandage visible below the shirt he'd apparently managed to put partially back on. The shadows under his eyes that said he hadn't slept more than she had. The way he held himself upright through what she knew from experience was considerable pain. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise exactly, but something adjacent to it, like he'd expected a different question. "I need to make a call," he said, "and I need you to stay away from the windows." He made the call from her kitchen, his voice low and clipped, switching partway through into what she was fairly sure was German. She sat in the living room and did not listen, which was harder than it should have been. She made herself a bowl of cereal she didn't eat. She checked the time on her phone. 7:14 a.m. She was supposed to work at noon. When he came back, he stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at her. "My surgeon is 40 minutes out," he said. "He'll come here. Okay, and I need you to know something." He crossed the room slowly, which she could see cost him, and sat on the couch again, his elbows on his knees. He was at eye level with her now, not looming, not using the full height she could see he carried. A choice, she thought. Another deliberate choice, like keeping his hands visible. You are not in danger because of what you did for me. That's not how I work. How do you work? She asked, a long pause. Debts are paid. I don't want payment, I know. He held her gaze. That's not what I said. Before she could answer, her phone lit up on the table between them. Unknown number. She looked at it, then at him. Don't answer that, he said. Who is it? Someone who's trying to find out if you're alone. Lena stared at the phone until it stopped ringing. Her cereal had gone completely soggy. She pushed it aside. I need you to tell me one thing, she said, and I need it to be the truth. All right, am I in danger? Not because of what you said you'd do or not do, regardless of your intentions. Am I in danger because you're in my apartment? He was quieter for a moment. She had the impression he was deciding how to say something honest without making it worse than it was, which was its own kind of answer. There are people, he said finally, who would very much like to know where I am right now, and if they believed you had helped me willingly. Yes, you would be relevant to them. He held her gaze. But they don't know your name yet, and my team has had 12 minutes to make sure it stays that way. 12 minutes. They're efficient. Lena pressed her back against the armchair and thought about that. Thought about the 12-hour shift she'd worked yesterday, the pad thai she'd never eaten, the 8 hours of sleep she'd planned on. Thought about her mother, who would absolutely lose her mind if she knew where her daughter was right now. Thought about the parking garage, the single exhale, the way she'd been on her knees before her fear caught up with her. Your surgeon, she said. Does he need anything when he gets here? Specific equipment, prep work. Dorian looked at her for a moment. A clean surface, he said, and the same steady hands you had last night. She stood up, got her kit from the table, moved toward the kitchen. I'll clean the table, she said. You should lie down until he arrives. You're burning energy just sitting up and you don't have it to spare. Voss. She stopped, turned. He was watching her with something she couldn't quite name. Not gratitude, not exactly. Something quieter than that. More complicated. The look of a man who was used to rooms arranged around his needs and had just encountered something he didn't have a category for. Thank you, he said, for last night. Lena looked at him. Outside, 30 black SUVs idled in the rain, and somewhere on the south side of her building, men she didn't know were waiting for information she didn't have. Her apartment smelled like antiseptic and cold coffee, and the cereal she hadn't eaten was congealing on her coffee table. Don't thank me yet, she said. Your surgeon hasn't seen my work. She turned back to the kitchen. Behind her, she heard him make a sound that might in another life have been a laugh. The surgeon arrived at 7:58 a.m. He was a compact, precise man in his 50s named Dr. Harwick. No first name offered, none asked. Who came through her front door with a black case and the calm efficiency of someone who had done this particular thing many times before. He assessed her compression work, looked up at her once with sharp eyes, and said, without particular inflection, "You do good work. I had 4 years of trauma nursing and a difficult patient," Lena said. Dr. Harwick glanced at Dorian. He's always a difficult patient. He set the case on the kitchen table. You'll want to stay in the other room. She didn't argue. She sat on the armchair with her knees pulled up, her phone in her lap, and listened to the quiet sounds of the kitchen, the low exchange of voices, the efficient sounds of instruments, and tried to make herself think rationally about what she was going to do next. She could still call the police. She knew she could. She sat with that option the way she sometimes sat with a diagnosis she didn't want to make, turning it over, looking at it from every angle, waiting to see if it felt right. It didn't, not because she had any particular allegiance to the man in her kitchen, but because something about the geometry of the situation felt unfinished, like a wound that wasn't ready to be closed. She was either very intuitive or profoundly foolish. She'd been told both things before. Her phone buzzed. A text from her charge nurse. "Can you cover the 8-4 tomorrow?" Reyes called out. She stared at that for a moment, the absolute mundane normalcy of it. The way the world outside this apartment had no idea what was happening inside it. And almost laughed. She typed back, "Yes, I can do that." When Dr. Harwick emerged from the kitchen 40 minutes later, he washed his hands at the bathroom sink, dried them, and stood in the living room doorway with his case at his feet. "The bullet's out," he said. "No critical damage. He needs 48 hours of rest and a week of antibiotics." He held out a small amber prescription bottle. "Every 8 hours with food. I know the protocol," she said. He studied her for a moment. "I imagine you do." He picked up his case. "He'll sleep for a few hours. I've left my number. If the fever goes above 103 or the wound site shows any sign of infection, I'll call you," she said. He nodded once. "He said to tell you," Dr. Harwick said, pausing at the door, his back partially to her, "that the south side is clear." He left before she could ask what that meant. She went to the front window and looked out. The north side of the street still held the dark SUVs, engines now off, men standing in the thin morning drizzle with the patient stillness of people who were very good at waiting. The south side was empty. She let the blind fall closed and went to the kitchen doorway. He was lying on the fold-out surface of her kitchen table. She'd need to have thoughts about that later. With a blanket pulled up to his waist, a fresh bandage on his side, and the deep, flat look of someone under sedation. His face in sleep was different. Not softer, exactly, but less assembled. She could see something in it she hadn't been able to see when he was awake. How much effort the control cost him. She turned off the kitchen light and went back to the living room. She cleaned up the bowl of cereal, made fresh coffee, called her best friend, a fellow nurse named Dana, and had a 20-minute conversation about Dana's terrible date from Friday and the new attending on the surgical floor, and said nothing at all about what was happening in her apartment. When she hung up, she sat with the phone in her lap and thought about what she'd just done, performed a completely normal life, perfectly, while 30 bodyguards stood on her street and a Mafia boss slept in her kitchen, and decided that she either had an extraordinary talent for compartmentalization or she was going into shock. She chose to believe it was compartmentalization. He slept for 4 hours. She knew the exact moment he was awake, because she heard the shift in his breathing through the kitchen doorway, the change from the deep rhythm of sedation to something shallower, more present. She waited. 3 minutes later, his voice came through the open door. "Voss." She got up, stood in the kitchen doorway. He was propped on one elbow, looking more alert than a man who'd just had emergency surgery had any right to be. "Sit down before you pull something," she said. He sat up instead, carefully. She crossed her arms and watched him do it, and didn't help because she could see he didn't need it. "The south side," she said. "Dr. Harwick said it's clear. It is." He looked at her. "We identified 3 of them. They've been redirected." She decided not to ask what redirected meant. "I need to leave tonight," he said. "You need to not leave tonight," she said. "You're 8 hours post-surgery and you have a prescription antibiotic protocol that starts in..." She checked her watch. 40 minutes! "I have people who can manage." "Your people," she said evenly, "let you get shot. I am the one who patched you up. You will take your antibiotics before you go anywhere." He looked at her. She looked back. She had the distinct impression this was not an experience he was accustomed to. Being spoken to this way, with this matter-of-fact authority, by someone who had no particular reason to be afraid of him. She also had the distinct impression he was deciding how to feel about it. "All right," he said finally. She made him eat something first. Toast, because that was what was easiest to manage, and soup heated from a can, because she wasn't going to cook a full meal for a man whose name she still only knew as Dorian. He ate without comment. She sat across from him at the cleaned kitchen table and drank her 3rd coffee of the day, and watched him in the way she watched all patients, not intrusively, just attentively, monitoring for the subtle signs of a body working hard to cope. "Why nursing?" he asked. She looked up. "What?" "It's a real question." He looked at his soup. "You could have been a doctor. You have the hands for surgery, and you read a wound faster than most MDs I've encountered." "Nursing is different from doctoring," she said. Doctors diagnose, nurses stay. He considered that. You like staying. I like the moment right after the crisis, she said. When someone's still scared, still shaking, and you can just be there with them. Hold the space steady while they figure out that they're going to be okay. She paused. It sounds small when you say it out loud. It doesn't, he said. She looked at him. He was looking at her with that same precise attention, but something in it had shifted. Less assessment, more something she didn't have a name for. She got up and got the antibiotics. He left at 10 p.m. She stood at her front window and watched the dark SUVs pull away from the curb one by one, smooth and synchronized until the street was empty again. The rain had finally stopped. The wet pavement reflected the streetlights in long orange lines. Her apartment was quiet in a way that felt different from the quiet before. Fuller, somehow, like a room after something has happened in it. She cleaned the kitchen table, changed the couch blanket, put her good towel, the one from the bathroom floor, in the wash, and accepted that it was probably not coming back from this. She made herself eat the pad thai, finally, cold from the refrigerator, standing at her kitchen counter. She was halfway through when she found the envelope. It was on her kitchen counter, under the prescription bottle. Unmarked, she opened it. Inside was a single card, the heavy cream kind that cost more per sheet than her groceries. 2 lines written in clean, slanted handwriting, to Dorian Falk. You'll know where to find me if you need to. She stood there for a long time. Then she put the card on her counter, threw the envelope away, and finished her pad thai. She did not look up the name until the following morning, sitting in her car outside the hospital before her shift, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. She typed it slowly, the way she'd learned to type searches she wasn't sure she wanted answers to. Dorian Falk, Kellner Collective, Chicago. The results came up fast. She read 3 articles, enough to understand the shape of things. The port contracts, the union leverage, the name that appeared in court filings as a business entity and never in police reports as a person. A man who existed on paper the way smoke existed, present, unmistakable, gone before you could hold it. She read the last line of the 3rd article twice. Sources close to the Kellner organization describe its current director as methodical, precise, and unusually for the industry, known for keeping his word. Lena sat in her car for another minute. Then she put her phone in her pocket, picked up her coffee, and went inside to start her shift. She held the space steady. She always did, but she kept the card.